My name is John Ludwig, and I started at Microsoft in the summer of 1988, and I was there until late 1999, and I started as an individual contributor in what was then the network business unit, and eventually moved over to the Windows group and became a vice president there, working on Windows 95 and, that era of Windows products. After Windows, worked on Internet Explorer and then worked on MSN and Hotmail and some of our cloud services before I left. I was born in Mansfield, Ohio, but moved when I was 2 to Marion, Ohio, and that's where I really grew up. I really wanted to have a career in engineering. I was a kid that grew up during the Apollo era, the moon landing. That was the most exciting thing you could imagine. And I watched all that and I was like, man, I want to work on those rocket things. That is so cool. And so I initially kind of wanted to be like a aerospace engineer, though I didn't know what that really meant. And then I kind of meandered around that and ended up going into electrical engineering when I got to college. My second year of college in electrical engineering, you had to take courses in electromagnetic field theory, design of antennas, and incredibly complicated math. And you'd take 3 terms of it. I did not like this course. My first term, I was a good student. I started out doing A work, but by the end of the term, I was getting C's on things. And so I skated out of that first term with a B in the course. The second term, I start out doing C work. And by the end of it, I'm doing failing work. And I get a C- in that course. And now I'm sweating bullets. The third term is coming up. And I cannot understand what this topic is. And that's when I discovered at my school at Ohio State, they had a computer science option where you could skip that third term and take a course in Boolean algebra instead, which was a godsend for me. So I switched to the computer science option, got out of that third term, and started studying computers and fell in love with them. It was really the expressiveness of them, the fact that you could tell this machine to do anything, and you could create things with it. And of course, at that time, it was pretty primitive what you're creating on the screen, but it was under your control, and it was a creative thing that was very appealing to me. The creativity of the personal computer was exciting to me, and I think Steve Jobs had that phrase, the bicycle for the mind, the ability to really let your brain do stuff and be a superpower for your brain and express all kinds of things and say things and create things. And that to me, delivering that tool to people and making it easy for everybody to do that was pretty exciting. To get to Microsoft from Ohio State, first I went to graduate school in Pittsburgh at Carnegie Mellon, and I got my MBA and my master's in electrical engineering there. And that kind of positioned me well to work at a technology company, but I wasn't ready to leave the Midwest yet. And so I went to work in Cleveland for a consulting firm because they were the smartest people that I met during the interview process, a company called Booz Allen and Hamilton. And I worked there for 4 years, and super smart people, but I was working on companies that made steel tubing and auto parts, and it didn't hit my heart right. And I was traveling 4 days a week, and it was killing my wife. And so after 4 years of doing that, I started looking around for jobs and eventually got, interviews with HP and Apple and Microsoft, and came out and met with Microsoft folks. And, I loved it here and loved what they were working on. And it took me a little while to convince my wife to move from the Midwest to Seattle, but eventually we made that move. So the first thing I worked on was Microsoft at that time did not have an email product. And we wanted to do an email server, and I ended up working on licensing some technology from a company in England that was the beginnings of what became Exchange. So I worked on that for my first, I'm going to say, year and a half or 2 years here. And at the end of that time, Microsoft at the exec level decided to make some big changes in the network products and organization, and that group got blown up. And part of it went to join what was the Windows NT team to do networking integrated with Windows NT, and then part of it, a very small part, went over to work for Brad Silverberg to put networking in the Windows 3X or Windows 95 products. And I went over to work for Brad on that. Prior to Windows 95, we did a product called Windows for Workgroups 3.1, which was Windows 3.1 with networking added. So you could connect multiple machines on a network, you could share printers, you could share files, and that was the first thing we did, and we shipped that product, and it was a modest success. It was successful mostly not because of the networking features, but because we also had a faster file system in the product that just made your disk work faster, and people bought it for that. So that was great. I mean, I'm glad people bought it for something. And then we rolled into the Windows 95 project, where we took responsibility for all the networking features of Windows 95. So again, that ability to share files, the ability to connect to NetWare servers, to Windows NT servers, the ability to send email, the ability to do dial-up networking and connect to AOL or MSN or CompuServe, and anything that smelled or felt like connectivity, we did as part of the Windows 95 effort. I remember one review with Bill where it was early on in Windows 95, and we were reviewing the work on plug and play, which made it easy to add, hardware to your computer. And this was early on, and we probably hadn't thought about the problem very well yet. And we were presenting to Bill, and it wasn't a very good design. And Bill looked at all of us and said, I think we need some smarter people on this. And then the meeting was over. Thankfully, the team, after about an hour, the team rallied and it was like, yeah, he's kind of right. That was not great work. We need to and so we had a review the following month of Bill, which went much better because the team really rethought what they were doing. And I think at that time in the company, there was a lot of direct feedback and communication about, the quality of your work. It was motivating. And I think we all valued the openness and were willing to rise to those challenges. During the development of Windows 95, the internet really started to take off. I think Mosaic was incorporated and launched their first browser, and we were still in the midst of trying to get Windows 95 done, but we saw this coming, and we realized at that point, we got a big thing we got to go work on because this is just moving faster than we realized. And so it was, even before Windows 95 was done, we started our browser team, and we started adding the IP stack to Windows, and we started planning for all that internet support to make all that happen. And it was hard because we didn't get some of that downtime we thought we were going to have, but it was exciting because it was a great wave of connectivity and cool new things happening that we wanted to be a part of. We did all have this sense of all working together and pulling on the same oars at the time. And I do have to give, big tip of the hat to Bill, to Steve, executives who gave everybody options packages when they joined. And those option packages really helped to align us all. I remember my first month when I joined the company, 1 month in, the Microsoft Word team announced a slip in their schedule, and the stock dropped a huge amount. And all of a sudden, my options package was underwater for the next year. I was making no money. But it was very motivating because when the Word team showed up and said, "Hey, we need some help. We're having trouble printing to network printers," everybody in the network business unit stopped and said, "Okay, let's help these guys," because it turns out that their success is our success and vice versa. And it's obvious that we should help them because they have a massive impact on, our own personal success. And I think we all shared in the same success. And I think the dominant part of our personal compensation was how the overall company did. And so it was easy to get people aligned on let's make our apps all great, or let's make this transition to Windows 95 really great, or let's all get this internet thing going well, because we all shared in that success. We did have a lot of autonomy. Someone once described the company as, it wasn't a battleship, it was a fleet of little speedboats. And a couple people would see that there was a new thing happening and they'd turn their speedboat that way. And then a few more would turn. Then all of a sudden, 500 speedboats were heading that way. And eventually the company would make it a formal plan. And so we were in that stage in early 95 of the speedboats starting to turn. And there were people in the Windows group, the Windows 95 group, that were realizing, oh my gosh, we need to have a browser. We need to be able to view this internet thing. We need to get that done. And so a small number of us started to chase that. And Brad Silverberg was very supportive. And it's not like we were doing this in secret. I mean, Paul Moritz knew, I think Steve and Bill knew, but it wasn't a big thing yet. But we were spending some time on it. By mid-95, there were so many people starting to think that way that, it was, okay, we need to actually start to corral all this and figure out what the heck we're doing as a company. My role in that kind of internet shift, we were going to take on the job in the Windows 95 group of building that consumer browser to get on the internet, to compete with Mosaic, and to, make it easy for a Windows customer to leap onto that internet and start to view sites and do things with them. And we started with like 2 people working on it in early 95, and we licensed a code base. And by the end of 95, I don't know, we had like 700 people working on it. And there were a couple reasons why we were able to shift so many people so fast. Number one, going back to that speedboat analogy, everybody read that memo. Everybody saw what was going on. People were motivated to start helping. 2, I think Bill gave out a strong message to the company saying, this is really important and you need to go help on this. And so that was motivating. And then 3 was a gift we got from Mark Andreessen, who came out with this famous quote, and he now denies he said it, but he said it, that they believed that they were going to, render Windows into just being a poorly debugged set of device drivers. Because his view of the world is all the interesting applications were going to be on the internet running through the browser, and the rest of Windows didn't matter. So, you just told, thousands of people here that their job didn't matter, and thousands of smart people that they were, meaningless. And that was very motivating. I mean, if when you needed to get help on some feature on internet work, you could just point to that quote and everybody would be like, yeah, I'm in, I'm helping. So it was pretty easy to get people to move. And, when you look at what we eventually shipped as a browser for Internet Explorer for the Windows platform, we had help from all over the company. When we started that effort, we had, Mosaic was in the market, Netscape, and we had 0% market share. And in the course of, less than a year, we got to like 30% market share by, climbing our way up out of that hole and building a great product. Internet Explorer 3 was a much better product than the Netscape product that was out there. And it was well designed, well architected, had beautiful interface, had great features, and getting from 0 to that, I think was a great accomplishment, and so I'm pretty proud of that. I worked some more on the client side of the Internet Explorer 4 and some of the mail apps and all the other net meeting and all the other communications apps that existed. So I worked on that for a while. But there was a lot of turmoil in the company about the primacy of the internet versus the primacy of Windows. And there were debates and squabbles and infighting, and eventually the Windows 95, the personal system team, got blown up. Brad Silverberg moved on to something else and then left the company. A lot of that team folded in underneath Jim Alchin, and I went over and worked for Pete Higgins in my last role on the internet service side, so MSN and the Hotmail acquisition and the services that we were offering people. So I that was my last big role at the company. The growth of that whole MSN organization and offering all those services was a whole new thing for the company, and it had some fits and starts, but some things succeeded very well there. Microsoft's legacy, I do think this. People remember the company for the PC wave. When before PCs, to use computers was basically nearly impossible, or you had to go through some priesthood of people, and delivering this tool to everyone. I think that's a big deal. I just had a great time here, and when the company was really humming and it was really great to be working with a bunch of like-minded people. The teams were great. There are people that I am still in contact with daily, weekly, from that time in the company, who are lifelong friends. I don't think any of us realized how special it was until later in our life. A few years ago, we had the Windows 95 reunion party, and that was an amazing party. It was great to see all those people, and just the number of really innovative, smart, nice people who worked on that project. It was a really fun time. Today in the industry, this whole AI wave that's bursting on us, and I think Microsoft's doing an amazing job at writing that and being incredibly relevant to people. If you want to use AI in your job today, you look at what Microsoft's done, and some of what they've done is amazing. And I do think it's a huge wave. We're moving from us having to tell computers every little last thing to do to now some agent on the computer kind of taking on some of that load and thinking on our behalf for us and doing a lot more of that stuff. And that to me, that's what computers should do. They should do a lot of that grunt work for us and make our life easier and save us time. And so I think this is a super big wave that's going to impact everything. I'm pretty bullish on it.